Okay, AP World History students, we are going to try a DBQ together. This will be our last practice DBQ before the period 3 exam that we're going to do in a few weeks. And the fact that you're watching this means that you decided to accept the idea of getting some help from me, your crusty old AP World History teacher. And to me, that makes you wise, smart. Lord knows there's plenty of things that I can't do in life, but one thing I can do is help students through a DBQ essay. So allow me to do that here. Okay, so we're going to do this one. It's going to be practice. It's going to go in the homework category of your grade. It's graded on the practice rubric, so it's got some give to it. And unlike the one we did last time, the Portuguese maritime trade one, this one has significantly less reading involved. It has its own challenges, of course, but it's, here we go. We're going to walk into this and give this another shot. So get out that DBQ in front of you. We open it up and first thing we do is we take a careful look at the prompt. So let me read this aloud. Prompt reads, evaluate the extent to which the industrialization of cotton goods in Japan and India in the period from the 1880s to the 1930s developed similarly. Evaluate the extent to which the industrialization of cotton goods in Japan and India in the period from the 1880s to the 1930s developed similarly. When it says evaluate the extent to which they developed similarly, that means we're looking for similarities and differences. And we are evaluating the extent, which means we got our spectrum. So did the industrialization of cotton goods develop completely the same or completely differently or somewhere in between? And again, you know the drill. In any DBQ, we're probably looking for, 2 similarities and 1 difference, or 1 difference and 2 similarities, because A, that's just how life is going to generally go. B, formulating an argument that way is going to help us lean into complexity and nuance, which so much of the rubric is really oriented toward. So that's what we're looking at. When we pick up these documents, we're asking ourselves, evaluate the extent to which the industrialization of cotton goods in Japan and India developed similarly. And we open up, and our first document is a chart. So it says the source, data gathered by British colonial authorities, production of cotton, yarn, and cloth in India. And when we're thinking about industrialization, we kind of consider handmade work versus machine work. So hand-spun yarn is going down. Machine-spun yarn is going up by a lot. Hand-woven cloth is rising somewhat, rising by a decent measure. Machine-made cloth is rising by a spectacular measure. Probably not surprising, given what we know about industrialization. So how did the development of cotton goods, what was the word? The cotton industrialization of cotton goods in India develop? We don't know anything about Japan, but how did it develop in India? Regarding sourcing, I've told you before, don't bother sourcing charts. I don't really know how to do it. I've never really seen it done successfully. So, there we go. These are the numbers. What can we use to answer the prompt with here? All right, moving on. Source, in document 2, 2 women recalling their girlhoods working in Japanese textile factories circa 1900. So 2 women, this says in Japan now, working in a Japanese factory. Textiles is fabrics. From morning, while it was still dark, we worked in the lamplit factory till 10 at night. After work, we hardly had the strength to stand on our feet. When we worked later into the night, they occasionally gave us a yam. We then had to do our washing, fix our hair, and so on. By then it would be 11 o'clock. There was no heat, even in the winter. We had to sleep huddled together to stay warm. We were not paid the first year. In the second year, my parents got 35 yen, and the following year, 50 yen. And it says yen is a Japanese currency. Soon after I went to work in the factory, my younger sister Aki came to work there too. I think she worked for about 2 years and then took to her bed because of illness. At that time, there were 30 sick people at the factory. Those who clearly had lung troubles were sent home right away. Everyone feared tuberculosis, and no one would come near such patients. Aki was also sent home and died soon after. She was in her 13th year. Aki had come to the factory determined to become a 100 yen worker and make our mother happy. I can never forget her sad eyes as she left the factory, sickly and pale. Yikes. So what can we learn about the industrialization of cotton goods in Japan from this document? Probably can't compare it much to India yet. We don't have enough information about India. If we're sourcing it, if we're saying this is a good illustration of what broader historical pattern, what broader historical process, could we point to anything else? Okay. Anyway, tough document. Okay, recovering, hopefully. This source, Tsurumi Sanshuke, a Japanese industrialist, circa 1900. So we're going from someone who works in the factory at the bottom to someone who owns factories. Where do the cheap workers come from? They all come from farming communities. People from families that are working their own land or are engaged in tenant farming but have surplus workers come to the cities and industrial centers to become factory workers. Income from the farms provides for the family needs and subsistence of the parents and siblings. The person who takes employment in the factory is an unattached component of the family. All he or she has to do is earn enough to maintain his or her own living. That's why the workers' wages are low. This shows how important a force agriculture continues to be for the development of our nation's commerce and industry. Okay, so what can we learn about the industrialization of cotton goods in Japan, in this case, in this period of time? Is this document a good illustration of any broader process or pattern? Is it surprising that this particular person would be making this particular argument? Explain why or why not. Is it surprising that this particular person would be justifying wage levels the way that he does? Why or why not? Explain that idea. If you can, you're in sourcing territory. Document 3. Radha Kamal Mukherjee, an Indian economist, The Foundation of Indian Economics, 1916. So we're back in India. This is an economist speaking. He says, for the last few decades, there has been a rapid decline of the hand-woven cloth industry throughout the country on account of the competition of machine manufacturers. Though many still wear clothing made from cloth woven on hand looms, large numbers of hand loom weavers have been abandoning their looms. The local textile industry owes its very existence, promotion, and growth to the enterprising spirit of native bankers and investors who invest large capital as shareholders, investors, and financiers. So what are we seeing about the industrialization, the development of cotton goods and industrialization in India in this period of time? Does this seem similar? Are we noting any similarities, I suppose, with what we're seeing in Japan? Does this harmonize with what we see in other documents? Is it surprising that an economist would make note of these things or point to these particular things with a particular tone that he does? Why? Explain that idea. Okay. Is this, by the way, an illustration of any broader pattern or process? A photograph. Sourcing photographs. We can do this. Source, photo from an official company history, the Nichibo Cotton Mill, Japan, 1920s. At first glance, I don't know what I'm looking at. Let's look carefully. An official company history. So this is the company that says, we want this picture. We want you to see this picture. Why? What are we looking at? We see some women in the foreground and some men. We see rolls of fabric, rolls of cotton. Looks like toilet paper, but it's not toilet paper, it's cotton. And what appears to just be huge rows, banks of machines in the background. So some women working, a few men shown as well, and lots of machines. Why would the company be showing us this? What do you suppose they're showing off? What do you suppose they want us to notice or see? What did the company perhaps not show us? And why? Is this harmonizing? Is this illustrative of any broader pattern or process or event? What does this tell us about how the industrialization of cotton goods developed in Japan in this particular period? Document 6, Report of the British Royal Commission of Labor in India, Calcutta, 1935. So this is a British report. Now we may or may not know that this is the time of the British Raj. India is a British colonial possession. If you're wondering why are the British here, India is a British possession, the crown of the British Empire, the crown jewel. Anyway, this report reads, most of the workers in the cotton mills are recruited from among the small peasants and agricultural laborers of the villages, along with unemployed hand weavers. They live in small rented huts. The average worker remains in the same factory for less than 2 years. Wages are low, and there has been no significant change in wages over the last decades. So what does this tell us about the industrialization and development of cotton goods in India in this particular period of time? Does this seem similar to or different from what we've seen in Japan? Does this fit with any larger, broader pattern in history that we could speak to? Explain why. Finally, document 7. Another photograph. Sources can be fun to, photos can be fun to source, I should say. The source here is Arno S. Pierce, British official of the International Federation of Master Cotton Spinners and Manufacturers Association. The photo is from a report on Indian textile mills in 1935. We see a big machine, a big textile machine, and 2 men working at the machine, and one other man watching them who I would guess is some sort of supervisor of some sort, or a guy taking a smoke break, who knows, right? But these 2 men appear to be working at the machine. And this is from some British organization of master cotton spinners and manufacturers. What is this telling us about the development of cotton goods in this period of time in India? Is this similar to what we saw in Japan? Are there differences? What are the similarities? What are the differences? The differences are staring at you in the face in these 2 photographs. That's one clue I'm going to give you. Can you see one key difference? So there's our documents. There's our DBQ. Evaluate the extent to which the industrialization of cotton goods in Japan and India in the period from the 1880s to the 1930s developed similarly. Is this a story of 2 places where the industrialization of cotton goods is happening in the exact same manner, form, and fashion? Or is this a story where it's just really happening totally differently? Or more likely, there are some similarities and some differences, or 2 similarities and 1 difference, 2 differences and 1 similarity. What do you got? How could we group these together to tell that story? What other outside information do we know about India that we could perhaps use as outside evidence? What other outside information about Japan do we know that we could use for outside evidence or for contextualization? Right? What could we do with this? We know we've learned about these places before, so what other information could we use? What sort of argument are we going to make? That is the work in front of you for next time. I believe you can do this, and I'm excited to read what you come up with. Help each other out. Don't just lean on me, the crusty old AP teacher. Help one another out. You guys can do this. You're going to do great, and I will see you next time. Bye, gang.